Hey folks, welcome to today's Open Leadership Program session. I'm Shibnur Shah, Open Leadership Global Lead and Coach at Red Hat Open Innovation Labs and Transformation Services. I'm based in Munich in Germany, and I'm really pleased to be here with you all today. Let's create a bit of an engagement and interaction so that we have some kind of interaction going on. So please head over to this link that you see and scan the QR code on your phone, or use the link on your browser to go to the polls we have lined up for you so that you can participate actively. And remember, you'll have to be quick with your entries as we'll be moving at a faster pace. Now, transparency is one of the 5 open organization characteristics, other 4 being inclusivity, adaptability, community, and collaboration. Thanks to Carrie for for setting up the stage for, introducing us to the concept of open organization and open leadership in previous sessions. And also thanks to Tom Geharty for introducing us to inclusivity in his last session. In today's session, we'll explore transparency and what it looks like in an open organization. We'll reflect on some organizational benefits of transparency and also evaluate the cost of not being transparent. We'll share some of our examples and ideas, and guess what? We'll invite you to share yours as well. We are hoping you as open leaders will go back with some useful insights to get you started in creating a culture of transparency and openness in your teams and in your organizations. So as early as 2003, in their book, The Naked Corporation, Don Tapscott and David Cole have referenced transparency as an old force with new power. It is becoming increasingly evident that organizations that are open perform better. And I'm proud to say that at Red Hat, as an organization, is one such example where we truly believe that transparency is indeed a new form of power that shouldn't be feared but harnessed. So before we deep dive into the topic, join us on the poll and share what you think transparency looks like in organizations. What words come to your mind? And how do you personally feel about it? Wow, this is like active. It's amazing. So I see information, ability to discuss problems or reprisal, right? So there's some kind of negative affiliations as well with transparency, as we can see. Fear, I'm so glad someone brought that up. Transparency and fears go so much hand in hand, and fear is something that could prevent us. This is great. So yes, thanks for your input. We'll explore some of these examples here and maybe continue the discussions about some of the topics that we can't discuss here in the LinkedIn group. Well, while there is no commonly agreed definition of transparency, it can be defined in many ways depending on the lens you look through, really. However, there is a general consensus that it relates to the right to know and open access to information. Most of the words you listed truly define transparency in many ways, both positive and negative. So for this session, we'll reflect on transparency through the lens of organizational culture and leadership, where transparency at work or in business means communicating openly and honestly with your customers, with your stakeholders, team members, and cultivating a culture where information can flow or can be accessed freely between people and teams. And this can happen in 3 ways. Creating transparency by making information and materials easily accessible, by creating transparency on how decisions are made, and by creating transparency around how work is done. So let's begin with with information and material sharing. So when it comes to that, an average employee in a conventional organization could spend anything up to 20% of their time per week searching for internal information or tracking their coworkers' health. Now, as much as possible and advisable under applicable laws, open organizations work to make their data and other materials easily accessible to both internal and external participants. Everyone in your organization should know with ease where to and who to turn to in order to solve problems or get work done by being able to find the right information and on time, because it greatly impacts teams and organizational efficiency, results, and outcomes. It really works in our favor. Everyone working on the project or initiative should have access to all pertinent materials by default. Therefore, the types of tools, systems, and technology you use can really make or mar levels of organizational transparency. These can not only support an organized flow of information, it can significantly help in breaking down barriers that disrupt progress, speed, and agility in businesses. Now, for example, at Red Hat, while we take special care to maintain and safeguard any sensitive customer data or information, we practice transparency by sharing our internal shared folders that include our working documents, slide decks. These are all open for sharing, collaboration, and feedback. Yeah, it might be surprising for some, but we do have to consciously make an effort. For some of us who might not be comfortable with it, but the results have been that we've benefited tremendously as a team. We proactively invite participation to projects and initiatives, especially from those individuals or teams who in some way or the other either influence the work or are affected by it. So join me at the polls to share how information and material is shared, transparency is shared in your organization. What are your practices within the organization? I'll give you a moment to think about it. Are there some good practices? I see that folders are shared. There is sharing that happens through emails. Yeah. Libraries. Interesting. Making work open and transparent is not always easy, and you could find many reasons for not being transparent. It could sometimes be that someone is a perfectionist and not comfortable sharing information earlier on in the project. Or maybe someone is not comfortable with feedback. Or it could be that in extreme cases, it may be that someone draws a sense of power or control they get by managing or controlling information. Sometimes it could be that transparent way of working is just not the way of working people are used to. So you see, there is no dearth of reasons why transparency can be hard to implement, right? It does require intention and conscious effort. All right, so those are great examples that I see there. Keep them coming. Moving on. The second type of transparency that can be exhibited in teams and organizations is related to decisions. In open organizations, decisions are transparent to the extent that everyone affected by them understands the processes and the arguments that led to those decisions. People who are affected by these decisions are able to access information, review past and existing processes, can ask questions openly, comment and provide feedback and input, including dissenting opinions in retrospect. A way to manage this is, for example, instead of shooting commands at your employees, managers and leaders can provide more information and context about most decisions. Expectations or task allocations, when explained, clarified, or even better jointly agreed upon, have the chances of sticking longer and the quality of decisions improve. And of course, wherever possible, team members, when included in decision-making process from the beginning to the end, could have absolutely phenomenal results and engagement. Now, what it does also is that when you include people in the decision-making process, right, that instills tremendous confidence in your people. And it also communicates your level of trust, your appreciation and respect for people's knowledge, skills, and capabilities. So when it comes to decision-making, leaders like yourself might wonder how to assess the level of transparency in your organization or team. Well, there is a very simple way to do this through a basic self-assessment tool that you're seeing here, which categorizes decision-making transparency into three simple levels. And these levels, as you can see, include the initial level of transparency, where there is no or little context provided, and people don't really know what they can or cannot share and where they stand. The second level is the defined level of transparency, and this is somewhere an in-between sort of state, with ambiguities, and could be very subjective. It definitely is not a definite level of transparency. The third level is the optimized level of transparency, where decision-making transparency is part of a team culture as a norm. And here the expectations around the context sharing and clarity are clearly defined and well established. So let's take a look at what levels of transparency exist in your organization, right? What best describes the level of transparency? for you in your teams? Right? Is it initial? Is it defined? Or is it optimized? So join me at the polls and let's take a look. Wow, we have close to, it's changing. It's very interesting to see the changes taking place. So we'll give it a few moments. So in most organizations and teams, it seems like there's some amount of transparency that exists more at a defined level. In some cases, it's initial. Somewhere it's optimizing, right? We'll wait a moment and see what the pattern is. And while you're playing with that and thinking about it, the results are interesting. Like, looks like in some cases there is great opportunity for improvement, and in some cases there is a high level of transparency, right? Even being at a defined level is a good place to start. And it also looks like that we could learn from each other. So here's a call to action. In the LinkedIn group that we have established, and you'll get to know more about, I'd love to hear about your challenges related to transparency, especially if you've chosen the initial or the defined level. And those who are choosing optimizing levels, do share with us your best practices and what helps you to become more transparent. Right. And while we are here, let's take a look at the results of a similar poll that we did a few weeks ago and see how different that is. Right. So what you're seeing now are the results from a few weeks ago with a group of people that we did the same exercise. And you can find that, hovering between define and optimizing, right? Just a piece of data. Okay, moving on. In open organization, when it comes to the third level of transparency, we're talking is work transparency. And work transparency looks something like, it's to the extent that anyone can monitor and assess a project's or initiative's progress throughout its development. In such cases, goals are public, which means everybody knows what's happening, what initiatives are being run, and they are visible, they're very explicit, and people working on the projects clearly indicate the roles and the responsibilities to enhance accountability. Here, mostly people are comfortable and are willing to disclose their work. They invite participation on projects before those projects are either complete or final. They also tend to respond positively to requests for additional details. In that sense, work is open to observation, feedback, and potential revision if necessary. A very simple example of ways of creating work transparency at Red Hat. In most parts, there's a very simple thing that we do, right? To enhance collaboration and to create the sense of transparency, we have a culture of keeping our calendars open. This is more of a practice. That means that unless an event or a calendar is private or highly sensitive and therefore confidential, you could be able to see the type of event on your calendar, right? Instead of just blocks. Now, to us, this is a way of giving trust so that our colleagues from any department can see what we are busy with and discern when good time to schedule a meeting or work-related activity. Now, what we have learned is that people take a lot of care and show a lot of empathy in proposing meeting times when they can see that our schedules look like, what they look like. And these are like small examples that you could experiment with. Now that we have explored some aspects of transparency together and have a foundational, understanding, we're at the same platform. What does it, how does transparency looks like in your organization, right? Is it something that's it's seen as a positive force to be harnessed? Is it something to be feared? Is it something that your organization is at the fence about? So I see some entries coming in on the poll that confirm that it's seen as a positive force to be harnessed, which is fantastic because it is about the mindset of an organization, right? And mostly in open organization, we consciously we are able to create an infectious enthusiasm about these open organization characteristics, right? Which makes it easier to embrace transparency, although it is often not, right? And that's why we need a mindset change or we require the right set of practices, right? Thanks for your openness and sharing. Incidentally, while some organizations swear by the benefits of transparency and are eager to learn and implement transparency practices, many managers and leaders are still reluctant or even afraid to use them. So studies are indicating that many companies remain wary and view greater calls for transparency as a challenge to be managed rather than an opportunity to be traded upon. Most teams and organizations embracing and practicing transparency could be a hard shift to make, and we recognize that. So let's take a look at what effects could a lack of transparency have, right? If it's not present. Now, to be upfront, lack of transparency can have devastating effects on organizations, and that can sometimes leave a permanent sort of strain on companies' brand image. Excessive secrecy can undermine the quality of decision making. Absence of or inaccessibility to information often creates a sense of disempowerment, mistrust, and frustration, which can further negatively impact productivity and efficiency. Teams can end up with duplication of work and wastage of time, and poor decision making due to lack of transparency. Inclusion feedback stifles innovation, and it negatively impacts an organization's competitive edge. And of course, inevitably, it impacts the bottom line as well. So in your experience, what could prevent people or teams from practicing transparency? What holds them back? Now, I noticed that most of you voted that your organizations have a fairly open and transparent culture. But what about your customers? What about your partners that you work with? Right? That might not be a reality there. So in your view, what could prevent individuals and teams from practicing transparency? Maybe somebody who joins your organization new and is very new to that culture, right? How could you support them eventually? This information could help us. Yes. Lack of trust, technology, rules, top-down management. Yes. Command and control can really do a lot of challenges for open organizations. Control and power. Yeah. Ego. Yes. All of these, absolutely. So you see, you can look at the aspects that prevent transparency. Could be systemic. They could be mindset and behavior oriented. Could be personality oriented, right? So we have this unique relationship at individual levels of how we respond to transparency. Great. Now that we have identified some challenges that could prevent teams and organizations from practicing transparency, let's look at some benefits of transparency in organizations to build a business case for it, right? So we are convinced about the choice we make about being transparent. Now, transparency goes hand in hand with trust. You can't have one without the other, and without both, your workplace culture and relationships will suffer. Lies and secrets break trust, while honesty and transparency build trust. And when trust is created, it leads to a heightened sense of security and better employee performance. Additionally, access to relevant, up-to-date information can create a basis for natural exchange, allowing everyone in the organization better access to how decisions are taken and implemented. When it comes to improved organizational effectiveness, even the most competent and honest decision makers need feedback on how their decisions are working in practice. Transparency enables effectiveness and accountability, and therefore it's a good choice. Now, when it comes to employee engagement, a 2019 study surveying over 1,000 US employees, right? Not really European study, but enough to give an indication, found that nearly 2/3 of employees have considered quitting because inefficient workspaces, place communication interfered with their ability to do their jobs. And in addition to impacting productivity, transparent communication and open ways of working has a major positive impact on employee engagement, on loyalty and happiness. So these are some of the examples that I could think of. What are some other benefits of transparency you can think of? How do you think you, as a leader, as a team, as an organization, can benefit from incorporating transparency in your ways of working in your organizations? Let's take a moment and see what entries come in. That's great. Inclusion, creativity, creativeness. Agility is speed. Transparency, right? While it might seem that it could slow things down, but really it really increases efficiencies, creates a harmonious culture. It promotes innovation because ideas are flowing. Yeah, a sense of camaraderie. Yeah, team feeling. I like empowerment as well. Transparency leads to and could promote collaboration. These are quicker results. Initially, it might seem that it's taking a lot of time, right? Because you're inviting feedback and it's leading to exchange. Sometimes it might feel like things are slowing down because it's so much easier and faster to work alone. But when you open up your work for feedback and input, right? You have questions that you have to answer. Sometimes it can be frustrating, but guess what? In the longer term, right, the benefits that you get far outweigh, not being transparent. So thank you for all those entries. Okay. So now, when you look at, we have found that the conversation is relevant and useful, and maybe you're wondering, so right, all these are good things about the transparency, and yeah, looks like we could benefit from it. So where should we start, right? And how could I implement transparency, right? Both at individual level and at a team level. So this is where we are going next. I'm going to invite you to take baby steps, right? Before changing the system and the organization, begin with yourself, right? Change always begins with self, right? It can have a long lasting impact and it's consistent. Begin with an intent to be transparent, right? And start with small experiments. Develop and enrich relationships at all levels by committing to be honest and truthful and assuming good intent for others. Also, developing skills of giving verbal and written feedback can be very useful. If you don't do this already, experiment with proactively seeking feedback and practice developing the ability to maintain candor and composure during the feedback process, especially when you're receiving feedback, because that could trigger a lot of emotions and feelings. So what one action could you take if you had to become a more transparent professional, more transparent individual after this session? When you go back, what do you think you could do? That one step. While you're thinking on that and being mindful of the time, I will continue with the next step that you could possibly take. Oh, there's an entry there. So you could open your calendar. Fantastic. Right. So, like we said, it's the intent. It's easy to talk about transparency and teach other people, but it's a decision that you make at an individual level. Start communicating, informing others, sharing your struggles. Yeah, sometimes expressing what your challenges are can really change the way people perceive how you're working and what challenges you're going through. It leads to more empathy. It helps build trust. Really happy to hear that you will start sharing your ideas and initiatives and share more proactively. Fantastic. Right. So that's at an individual level. What you could also do is you can take some very specific steps at at a team and an organizational level. There are many things you can do, but I'll just give you like a top 2-3 that you can start with. Make information more accessible, right? That's an intent you have. Some of you have already expressed. Most day-to-day information and decision-making processes can easily be made more open and available. Start by involving and exploring opportunities, preferably with your teams, because they have, often have the best ideas. Provide more context. It always helps to set clear goals and expectations as a team, and nothing beats, collaborating and developing trust and developing interpersonal relationships. Open decision making allows people to participate and ask questions and share ideas and contribute. And when people are enabled to ask questions in open and honest ways, it really nurtures a mutual understanding, encourages people more to share and collaborate with each other. So use practices like, social contract, retrospectives, real-time feedback, showcases from the open practices library, and see how things change for you. right? And also think about, and while we might not have we be able to wait for too long, but do think about what one action you can take to create transparency in your team and in your organization. Remember that transparency is really a journey, right? It's not a one-time action that you perform. It has to be consistent. It has to be maintained. It requires that you have trust, that you are, it requires that you adapt to, something that you're adapting to, that you're not habituated to, right? Practicing transparency requires developing a specific mindset, adapting new behaviors and practices. It requires creating an open organizational culture, which is supported by supporting systems, technologies, and processes. So I'll let you decide for yourself whether you think transparency is utopia or not. What I can say is that it definitely is worth rooting for transparency in organization. With that being said, we invite you to join us in the Open Leadership LinkedIn group for more discussion and exchange on transparency and also other open organization topics. Here are some resources for you that we'll also be sharing via email. That'll help you become better open leaders and more transparent organization. Next week, you will hear from my amazing colleague, Chris Bainham Hughes, who will talk about collaboration. Don't miss it. And till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep practicing transparency. See you there. Thank you.